Hey, good morning, everybody. Andrea's on vacation, so she won't be joining us today. I am traveling also in the Pacific Northwest, so I'm not in Texas. But hopefully, we have two Texans on the program this morning. We're going to be talking again about immigration and several other issues, mostly the economic impact that illegal immigration creates in the state of Texas. There were some statistics put out earlier in the year in an article by the Texas Tribune that talked about how the Attorney General of the state of Texas says that it's costing taxpayers almost $1 billion to absorb the cost of undocumented aliens in the state of Texas, in addition to the surge, which is what the governor's trying to do along the border to protect taxpayers along the southern border of Texas. So this morning, we're being joined by my dear friend Artemio Muniz. We call him Temo. He is an attorney, but he's more than that. He's been very active in the Republican Party. He's uh, sometimes, like I like to call, can be a burr in the saddle of the Republican Party. And he and I agree on a lot of things with respect to the Latino community and what the Republican Party does and doesn't do. So I'm really happy to have him on the program this morning. And then afterwards, we're probably going to go to San Antonio or Austin, I don't know. But Rafa Behar with Texas Public Policy Foundation is with us this morning. So, Temio, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Orlando. Hope everything's well out there in the Pacific Northwest. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm assuming I don't know where you are. Are you in Houston?
I am in Houston, downtown.
Yeah. What's the weather like this morning? Pretty warm.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's Houston's hot, summertime, and hopefully you're out there in the mountains or something cool, and you're having a cool one out there. But yeah, Houston's incredibly hot these times of year.
Yeah, we're about 68 degrees. It'll probably get about to 87 this
Oh,
morning.
way to rub it in, Orlando.
All right. So you and I saw each other at the National Hispanic Professional Organization annual meeting, which was a good meeting. It's called the NHPO, uh, and we have a lot of friends there. And I was delighted to see you. I want to talk to you because over the years, immigration is such a huge issue because there's so many aspects of it, Demio, and even for example, I'm an immigrant. I came here because I was seeking asylum in 1962 from fleeing a communist country. But not all of us agree on what the solutions are. But I think in general, Demio, do we agree that the United States has a duty to protect taxpayers, citizens, and legal residents of the United States? And beyond that, don't we as a country have a right to decide who comes in and who doesn't come in?
Absolutely, I think that's the core, right? I think American sovereignty, controlling our own borders, controlling our own nation state, and to a degree, making sure that American culture survives as there's pressure from the left all around the world. We see countries right now that are pushing their ideology even into our own nation, in our universities and our media. And it's always going to be a war of nature. It's going to be a war of all against all, and the American ideal is under attack. So uh, I agree with you, Orlando. I think that we got to start with that premise. And unfortunately, we look at our colleagues on the left, the extreme left, and I don't even think they agree with that. So when we talk about the debate on immigration, it's hard to find common ground in the solution because not everybody's acting good in good faith. But I think we need to start with that premise as the beginning step.
So we agree that we have a duty to protect our citizens, our taxpayers, our legal residents, and those here visiting on legal visas, and that we have a duty to decide who gets to come into the country. Um, Beyond that, there are easy things that we can do. We've had this debate about, let's start with DACA, the Deferred Action on Childhood Arrivals. I see that as a no brainer, Temio. I mean, people can say, yeah, the kids were brought here by their parents, they're illegal aliens too. But, think about it. They were brought here as children who probably don't even speak their native language. They've grown up here, they've gone through school here, they're acculturated. Uh, Is that an easy one to fix? I mean, I just don't see why in Washington they can't agree to resolve the issue of DACA.
I agree with you. DACA is a slam dunk in terms of, I believe, as a conservative, we are needing to draw a line in the sand here in American society, not just with immigrants, but I think in general, uh, we have a culture on the left of taking, government providing, and this huge safety net, right? Almost like a from the crib to the from the cradle to the grave, right? Or the like they say, right? The leftist ideology of the government providing everything, taking resources from our neighbors so we can live in. We think we're going to live in comfort, and this idea of where people, we tax each other to death pretty much in order to have everybody equal. I think we got to eliminate that idea. And when you look at immigration, DACA sort of starts the line at, hey, do you contribute? Are you building this country? Are you working? You can't be a burden. I think that word burden, a lot of people are afraid to use it. But like Milton Friedman said, if you're going to have immigration at all, and if you're going to have illegal immigration coming in, well, you can't have illegal immigration and welfare. That's a, I mean, that's a bad combination for a country like the United States or any country. So we've got to control this idea of welfare, or right, giving away the taxpayer money to other people. And I think that's an issue we're facing right now. And we got to figure out how to put a stop to that. And I think that war between conservatives and socialists and Marxists, I think it's underway all across the board, not just on immigration. I think we see it everywhere in public policy. But immigration is one of those areas that I think we need to start with that idea that if you're going to be here, say you were brought here illegally, or you overstayed your visa, or we got to start with the idea that you have to be a contributor, right? And I think that's where conservatives can do well, is put that message out there. And I think most Americans would agree with that. That if you're not working, if you're committing crimes, you got to go. I mean, that's the bottom line, I think, for most Americans.
Daniel, one of my concerns over the years, as you know, on any given month, we may have 250,000 people come across the border. They either get stopped by CBP or they don't get stopped and they're successful and they come all, to Houston or Dallas or make their way up through the United States. Here's my concern. If we're not going to, as they call it, inspect people or have checkpoints at the border about who's coming through, you hit the nail on the head. We know that Latin America is full of Marxists, it's full of Sandinistas, it's full of communists, it's full of socialists, it's full of Leninists. If we have millions of people coming into this state, into this country, and we're not checking backgrounds, that's a danger to our democracy, is it not?
Well, you do have, unfortunately, in a lot of those Latin American countries, you do have failed states. You have cartels running the states. I mean, you can look at Mexico at the governorships, and you have actual cartel kingpins that are now the governors. So, things have changed in a drastic way compared to when my father came over from Mexico when he was 14. It cost $300 to cross over, and you had the local. I know about stories in the 80s in Texas of the local carpenter or the local pastor bringing guys over from Mexico. But now it costs $4,000 to $5,000, and the routes are controlled by cartels to smuggle people in. And guess what? It's just not immigrants that are coming over. They're carrying contraband. They're carrying drugs. They're carrying fentanyl. So the danger level has really increased, and so the crisis we're facing now is definitely a huge issue for the American way of life. And I do agree that we have the immigrant that is coming at this point at the border. I think it's a very different type of mentality versus the immigrants that have come across in the 80s, after Reagan's amnesty, guys that right now you probably can find them in Houston and Dallas roofing and in restaurants, and they're working hard, and they're mostly of Mexican heritage. Those guys are working without documents, without papers. They are illegal, but they've been working, and they're looking at the new generation of immigrants that are getting $7,000 checks, $6,000 checks. They're getting cell phones. They're getting reprieves immediately from the Biden administration. They're like, well, wait a minute. I've been working here for years, haven't broken a law. I'm actually working on a ranch, or I'm working on a construction site, and what about me? And these guys are just walking across now. They're just giving themselves over to to officials. They're like, wait a minute, that's not fair. So I think you're starting to see a divide also within the Hispanic community as to what's going on with the immigration issue. And I mean, even Democrat congressmen are upset at Biden's administration for the chaos at the border. But I agree with you. We got to watch out for the influence. I also believe, though, that I do believe also that people vote with their feet. And you got in that segment of immigrants, you have people that also want capitalism, and that's why they're here. However, we don't know who they are, and we've got to identify them, and we've got to separate those that are going to contribute versus those that are going to take. And I think at that point, we have to create a system where we've got to have people that are going to respect the laws and build this country up with us.
Is there a taint of, can you make the argument that the policies of this administration can be a bit racist? And here's what I mean. To
Okay.
allow people to come into this country and say, yeah, come on in, we'll bus you, we'll ship you around to different cities, but you will remain uninspected. That is, you will remain an illegal alien. Is that fair? Is that right?
Well, what I think is when you have, right, on behalf of the point of view of being an American citizen, it's definitely unfair to us because, I mean, we, as an American citizen, every day, we have a social contract. We pay our taxes. We follow the rules. We follow the law. I mean, every day we build families. And then you turn and you see, for example, the immigrants that at the border here in the last few years under the Biden administration, they don't even check them for COVID. And here we are being told by the government that we can't go here, we can't do this, we can't do that. And then you look and you would think that the government would take even, super extra precautions for people that are entering our country under the asylum program or the refugee program or even illegally when they're caught. And those type of restrictions and measures aren't applied to them. So there is a level of unfairness that I think most Americans are tired of. Uh, that's
Yeah.
why I that's why I think when we're talking here, we see the huge opportunity to fix a huge problem and see if right we can to being problem solvers on the issue. I think the conservative movement can really score some major points here, win hearts and minds, and also we can really damage the left. We're already doing it. Various people are doing it, exposing that the Democrat Party and the extreme left is not acting in good faith on behalf of the Hispanic community and even the immigrant community because they don't have a solution that brings about a good compromise.
Yeah, but my question was a little more specific. If it's a matter of public policy for this administration to allow people to come to this country undocumented, basically what we're saying is that the government at the federal level, which is the only entity that can enforce immigration laws, the government at the federal level is in the business of importing cheap labor. And this cheap labor, Temio, we are saying to them, come work illegally, but you will forever be undocumented. And my question is that fair to them, the undocumented people that are coming and then they get married and have children here and then their lives are a mess?
So I think that question is at the root of where, even on the conservative side, you have a lot of disagreement, and I think we got to jump into the nuance of it. If you talk to the immigrant, which I have as an attorney, and I've talked to people even from the 80s, 86, 87, 88, who are still here legally and have families, they got kids that serve in the military. They'll tell you that all they want to do is work. They just want to work free. Their focus is working and making money. And when we talk about the argument of cheap labor to them, especially like in Houston and Dallas, uh, when you ask them what they're making market price wages. Right now, yes, there are places where you have immigrants who are they're being exploited, and there is no mechanism for them to report. You have the sex trafficking trade in Houston, which is the largest in the nation, where you have illegal immigrant women who are being recruited in their villages in Honduras and El Salvador, and they're brought to Houston to be part of the sex trafficking industry, and we don't hear from them. They're living in the shadows, and it's like it's modern day slavery, right? So those it depends on the perspective of who you're talking to, and I think right now with the chaos at the border under the Biden administration, we're seeing more of the latter, of more of the sex trafficking, more of the drug trade, more of that disorganized, open border culture that is growing in the urban areas of Texas. And so now it's like, well, wait a minute. Back in the 80s and 90s, we had these guys coming over working on roofing, construction, and they're still around, and there are a lot of them, and they're still working. But the current immigrant class is no longer of that mindset. Now it's like, hey, somebody passes out leaflets out there in their home country. Um, Rumors are that it might be cartel trying to overbear our border, and you have these caravans coming, and they're not coming to work, and they know that they're informed. They know how to use the system to get what they want. And so we have this order, and that's credit to President Trump, right? He understood the power of human nature and linkage politics, and he understood how to put pressure on Mexico, Guatemala, and those countries to make sure that they assisted our interests, the American interests, in stopping these caravans. But President Biden, it's open border season, and we have chaos again. And what happens is Americans become frustrated, and they're like, wait a minute, just shut it all down, throw everybody out. And I understand that point of view. I think we have to figure out a way here to fix this, because either extreme solution is not going to help the situation overall.
Yeah, well, as I started the program, I said that the Attorney General of the state of Texas claims, and probably true, and I think the number is lower, that it's costing Texans 800 million a year, but that never included the surge down at the border with our National Guard and our DPS troopers, uh, and just what gets me, Temio, and this as an attorney. If I go to Del Rio, Texas, and I go to the Home Depot, and a man says, "Hey, I'm a sheetrocker, I'm a painter," and I say, "Well, look, I need some painting," and I bring him to my house, and he's undocumented, and I get caught by the Border Patrol. The fine is like a couple $100,000. They confiscate my car, and I can serve time in jail. On the contrary, when undocumented aliens cross the border, the government actually spends our tax dollars to transport them around the country. I mean, none of this makes sense to me.
I agree with you. We have this. Look, I mean, if we want to get down and dirty, we have huge industries that do benefit off legal immigration, and at this point, even enforcement. I remember in the '80s when my parents were at that time, they didn't have documents, and even shopping in Houston, we would go to local shopping centers, and I remember, immigration being at the entrance to these stores and doing random checks. So we were enforcing at that time. Enforcement was way higher, and so we look at the current situation, and I think we have a disconnect, right? We have a lot of upset Americans at the border situation. There is a lack of enforcement, and so when you look at somebody like myself who proposes some type of worker program, I lose support from fellow Americans who think, well, they say, Artemio, we agree with you that we should do something for those that are hardworking, but how do I trust the government that they're going to enforce the law after we do that? How do we make sure that this doesn't happen again? How do we know that we're going to give people a break, and then a few years later, we're back to square one? And I understand that, and I agree with that. And so now I seek strong enforcement, and that's part of my approach is, look, we need to cut a deal here for those that are hardworking, right? And we have to identify. I mean, we've got to be stringent and extreme. You put hoops of fire, and the immigrants that really want to be here and contribute will jump through those hoops of fire. They'll do whatever we ask of them, and then after that, we need to have a strong enforcement mechanism. And I mean deportations, right? And you have to be ready to enforce the law at the border and around the nation. But I think Americans want to see proof of that first. And the way I see it is right now with the border situation under the Biden administration, we're not showing that. So there's a lack of trust in our government. So I understand that, I would like a solution for those that are hardworking, but it's going to take convincing a lot of our fellow Americans to make sure that the American government does its basic job.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we agree on just about everything, Timio. I mean, I started off by saying let's get the easy stuff done. DACA is easy. How about increasing the number of work visas that we issue in embassies across the Latin America and other countries? That would resolve a lot of the problem because we're documenting people. We know who they are. They have a visa to come work for a period of time, and then they can either extend it or go back. And then finally, as you say, for the hardworking families that have been here for a long time and have proven that they're here only to work, only to make a contribution, only to be acculturated into the culture, and their children become Americans. For those people, we ought to do what I call, we came up with the name family stabilization, stabilize the families that are here under the fear of deportation and separation. I'm not the only one that thinks that way. We have a congresswoman out of Florida who came up with what would be called the Dignity Act. Same thing. Families that have been here, that have demonstrated they're paying taxes, that are demonstrated they're contributing, that they're working, that they don't have a criminal record, let's document them. That doesn't mean pathway to citizenship. It just means
Right.
that they're documented. And and we've polled that, and immigrants like it. We even polled it in the five largest counties in Texas among primary Republican voters, and it had a favorable reception. So, as I began the show by saying, let's do the simple things first, those are simple things, and it can be buttressed with enforcement. And I agree with you 100%, Tim. If you don't have domestic enforcement, this is a joke, and we don't have domestic enforcement. So I'm glad you came on the program. I've watched you for years, and glad that you are a strong voice in the conservative movement and the Republican Party, and that hopefully working together, we can convince our colleagues. Because frankly, as you know, Temio, this isn't just a Republican problem, a Democrat problem, because we as Republicans have had control of the Congress and the executive and done nothing. And then the Democrats come in and they control Congress and the executive and they do nothing. In fact, nothing has been done since 1986, as you point out, since Reagan signed the Immigration Adjustment Act. So, this is going to be a long battle, but I'm glad that you came on the program, and I'm glad that you're in the fight. And we're going to have you back on the program because we want to talk more about this.
Thank you, Orlando. Thank you for having me on.
All right, buddy. Take care. And now to talk a little bit about the costs associated with illegal immigration, because, folks, there is a cost to the American taxpayers. Somebody's got to educate the children. Somebody's got to provide for the health care. Somebody's got to provide for emergency health care. Somebody's got to respond for police protection. Firefighters have to respond when there's an injury or a wreck for undocumented aliens. Undocumented aliens also have to avail themselves, like any other human being, of social services. Who pays for that? We do. Undocumented aliens come to the border, and we have to pay for their transportation, whether it's buses provided by the governor or it's airplanes provided by the Biden administration. None of that is free. We as taxpayers are paying for it. So I've asked Rafa Berhar from the Texas Public Policy Foundation to join us this morning and talk a little bit about the cost to the taxpayers. So, Rafa, are you with us?
Yes. Hey, good morning. How you doing, Orlando?
Good. How are you? So tell
Good.
us, Rafa. Texas Public Policy is a nonpartisan organization that just looks at public policy. They go to hearings whenever the legislature is in session to make recommendations. They're sort of a resource for the Texas legislature and the governor and any interested party. But I know you folks have tremendous amounts of resources, and you've done tremendous amounts of research. So tell us, what is the cost to taxpayers in Texas of undocumented illegal immigration that we see under the Biden administration?
Right. Well, so again, you were talking about the cost, for the average Texans, and it's a tremendous amount of cost, right? First of all, we're all suffering right now with the problems of inflation, the high price of gas and food and stuff. And I can tell you that, we pay as Texans about, 800 over $850 million a year on this of expenses for illegal immigration, and that was something that was put together. Was put together by Attorney General Ken Paxton last year, and the breakdown is as follows, so people get an idea of what we're talking about. Just throw, numbers at random, right? The $850 million a year comes down to like about Texans pay between 579 million to 717 million each year for public hospitals to provide uncompensated care to illegal aliens. Texans pay 152 million to house illegal criminal aliens just for 1 year. Texans pay 62 million at between 62 million and 90 million to include illegal aliens in the state emergency Medicaid program. Texans pay more than $1 million for the family violence program to provide services to illegal aliens for 1 year. Okay, Texans pay between 30 to 38 million per year on prenatal coverage for illegal aliens through the Children's Health Insurance Program, and also we pay between 31 million to 63 million to educate unaccompanied immigrant children. And so these are very specific costs, and that, as you alluded to before, doesn't include all the costs that go into DPS, for enforcement, and all the other costs that go into that, right? I mean, so the expenses is actually a lot more, and these are just dollars. But we also have to think about what is the impact to the community on what's happening, and so it's not just the money; it's the impact and the quality of life on average Texans. And I will also go on to say that the majority of that impact is on the Hispanic community, because, listen, as as you said and as Temio said, nothing comes across the border without the cartel's approval. Right? Everybody has to pay. Cartels essentially have operational control of the border, control who goes, when they go, and then when they come over, they prey on our Hispanic community here in Texas, right? Because that's where they set up their bases of operation. Along the border, in the urban areas of Houston and San Antonio and Dallas and across El Paso, across the state, Laredo, Del Rio, Eagle Pass, and that's what they're doing, right? And they're actually recruiting kids through TikTok to become drivers, to come down some of these illegal aliens and ferry them Houston or Dallas or San Antonio. It's just incredible, and the impact is tremendous.
And all the numbers you talked about, which is quite sizable. So you mentioned about $800 million that Texans are paying for services to the undocumented population in Texas. You didn't mention, however, the surge that the Lone Star, Operation Lone Star, that the governor's got going down there. I think they spend about $800 million a year. Do they not?
That's correct. That's correct. That's correct.
So the 800 million that you talked about, that the that was in the figures you gave us, we can double that. So
Yeah.
we're
So
now
you're
at
talking you're talking about $1.6 billion, right?
yeah. So we're approaching about $2 billion. And I was thinking as you were rattling off those numbers, you're absolutely right. No one calculates the cost to taxpayers. For example, you mentioned how they recruit children on TikTok. Why do they recruit underage children to drive the cars bringing in the illegals? Because the cartel know that under Texas law, you can't prosecute a juvenile. So they find 15 and 16-year-olds to drive those cars from Del Rio and Maverick County, Eagle Pass, into Texas because if DPS or Department of Homeland Security pulls those kids over, they arrest them, but because they're juveniles, they don't get tried in adult court. I mean, people just have no clue what's going on. But
And
those children,
those are Hispanic kids, right? So again, that's what I'm saying. They
right?
play on our, on us here in Texas, right? On the Hispanic community here in Texas.
Yeah, but what we didn't mention was those children don't have the driving skills, and when they're doing 90 miles an hour, 100 miles an hour on Highway 90, and they're fleeing DPS, and they get involved in a head-on collision, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to those families. You know, the victims. So sometimes they drive through ranchers' gates and fences, and the cattle gets out. You know, I mean, the cost associated with this. And you also mentioned the cost associated with the high concentrations of undocumented aliens in urban Texas. In the city of Houston, as you know, which is the third largest school district in the nation, I would submit to you, because of the overwhelming number of illegal aliens in the schools, it affects the quality of education because you can't move as quickly. You know, if you have native born children that have command of the vocabulary, command of the English language, they'll move a little more quickly. But because we're overwhelmed with undocumented aliens, we have to sort of dumb down the curriculum. And you see that in the results, all the statistics when they test children in public schools in Houston, we underperform in just about every category. Yes, there are some schools that are magnet schools that are reserved for some of the best and the brightest. But on average, the public education delivered in urban Texas, because we're overwhelmed by undocumented aliens, is less than acceptable.
I have to agree with you. I mean, it's really an undue burden on our public education system, which is already suffering. I mean, a lot of, parents, there's a big, parental empowerment movement going on in, across the country, and particularly in Texas, and a move for school choice because public education is just job. It has to do with what you just mentioned, that in many school districts, the burden is just too much.
Yep. Well, the bureaucrats have had their chance and they blew it. Rafa, we're out of time, but again, I want to thank you and Texas Public Policy Foundation for all you do in the state of Texas, providing nonpartisan research and public policy analysis of everything that comes out of the legislature. I think Texas is, moved in the right direction for a number of years because of the work that TPPF does in Texas. So we thank you. And I guess we're going to see you in Austin in a couple of weeks. We're going to make a simultaneous presentation on some very interesting polling information we have. So we're looking forward to seeing you. Until the next time, take care. Appreciate it.
All right.
All right, folks. Well, that's the program for today. We wanted to keep it short because we wanted to just give you a little briefing on the costs associated with illegal immigration. Everybody wants to talk about illegal immigration, but nothing gets done. As I told Artemio Muniz, the Republicans have been in control of the Congress and the executive branch, and nothing's happened. Now the Democrats are in control of the Congress and the executive branch, nothing happens. And if they would just work on the problems that are affecting the American taxpayer as ably as they fight among themselves, we might get something done. But perhaps that's for another day. All right. Well, if you want more information, go to our website. It's TexasLatinoConservatives.com. We're a nonprofit, 501c4, and a Texas General Purpose Political Action Committee. So we do help candidates that we think are conservative and qualified to serve in the state of Texas. But we also train a bunch of young Latinos across the state of Texas on how to become the next wave of conservative leaders in Texas. So if you want to help us make a contribution, again, it's TexasLatinoConservatives.com. And hopefully we'll see you guys next week. And hopefully Andrea will be back from her European vacation. Until then, take care and be safe.